Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for spending your evening here in this Zoom room. We will give the room about 3 minutes to fill.
Do you want to just give a quick review, just like have people if they have questions?
So just some Zoom norms. We're going to try to keep our mics muted. If you did want to be on screen, it gives it a little bit of a coffee shop feel. We will be kind of doing speaker view where our awesome presenters will be displayed, but the most important thing is to keep your mic muted so that our presentation goes without interruption. We do, though, encourage with your mic muted, which I'm just going to demo really quick, some virtual snaps. We could put snaps in the chat. And we'll also be having a Q&A at the end of the presentation. And so if you did have a question for anyone on our kind of presenters, you could put it in the chat and I'll circle back to it at the end. I guess I can say, hi, everybody. I'm Britt Campbell, the manager of public engagement at the Autry. I was a fan first of Pamela and now a collaborator. And so it's always a pleasure to work with her. She is the curator of this evening and will get started in our program in just another moment. If you are new to the room, we're encouraging everybody to keep their mic muted so that we get to hear the wonderful, beautiful words that will be spoken. Thank you.
Do you want to tell them about the giveaway?
Yes, thank you. So just by showing up this evening, we hope that you will continue to want to support artists and poets that we'll be hearing from later. And so you've been automatically entered into a giveaway, and one person will win a work by Rowie and one person will win a work by Jake. So we will email you by the end of the week if you have been selected to be a winner. And even if you don't win, we encourage you to check out the works of art that these poets have contributed to. And those are on the Autry website, along with the information Sahar will be presenting. I think it's 6:03, Pamela, if you want to.
I can start. Yeah. Yat Esha Pamela Peters in Chia, Touching in Islam, Ashti Bashishin, Tohadlini Dashiche, Ado Kitlashini Dashanale, Quit Ago Nazahishle. Hi, everybody. My name is Pamela Peters. I just greeted you in my traditional Navajo clan greeting. I am from the Red Running into the Water clan, born for the Red Chick people. I live here in Los Angeles, but I'm originally from Red Valley, Arizona. And I grew up around the Shiprock, New Mexico area of the reservation. I say my clans because it's a fabric of my existence. It also humbles me and it reminds me of my ancestors. And it also is a reminder for myself that my journey as a Diné woman continues. I wanted to start to say that, we live here, for me as a Diné woman, we live here on Tavangar, the original home of the Tongva people. I feel it's important to acknowledge our tribal relatives as the original tribal people of this land base, which many people today know as Los Angeles. I like to pay my respects to the Tongva ancestors, the elders, all the relatives, the relations of the past, present, and the emerging. I also hope beyond this land acknowledgement that you as viewers of this reading will learn more about where you are, of whose land you currently live on, or even visiting here in the United States. It's important to go beyond a land acknowledgement. It's important to know and respect the indigenous peoples, culture, history, and existence of where we are in the United States. I also want to recognize and thank wholeheartedly the Autry Museum, especially Brittany Campbell, who has been such a huge advocate for the American Indian community here in Los Angeles. She definitely supports the voices, the culture coming directly from tribal people like myself. And thank you, Brittany, and thank you to the entire staff of the Autry Museum. As you know, many Navajos have been deeply impacted either directly or indirectly through our kinship ties by COVID-19. Most news reportings reveal the tragic impact of COVID-19 on the Navajo reservation, yet we rarely hear from the people directly impacted. Because of this, I decided to do a poetry reading so people can hear us instead of reading about us. I want people to understand that we are strong, resilient individuals who have persevered many atrocities, and we will persevere from this tragic virus that's going around. We are a community who understands which means kinship, and how we as Diné people have come together during these challenging times. I love poetry, but lately I have not been very motivated to be creative. Most news I hear from back home on the res has not been good. This COVID-19 virus, this worldwide pandemic has definitely taken a toll on me, both physically and emotionally, as it has probably to many people. However, I strongly believe outlets like poetry events helps people in ways of coping, and also gives an understanding from the people that have been hard hit by this virus. For me, poetry has definitely helped. My aunt back home shared some of her poetry with me a few weeks ago. I was going through a difficult moment after hearing the death of a relative, and my aunt's words helped me cope with my overwhelming feelings. Her words revived me, and from that, I had an epiphany. Why not create an event where more people can hear about the Navajo culture, and what better way than with beautiful words? Through the partnership of the Autry Museum in Los Angeles, we are able to give you 2 evenings of sharing some Saad Nizhóní beautiful words from 4 amazing Diné poets. Last week, we heard from the poetic words and storytelling of Sherwin Bitsu, along with the beautiful poetry and the tribute song from Tacy at City. In keeping up with our last week's poetry event, tonight you will hear from 2 amazing poets. Our first reading will be done by Roanna, Rowie, Shebala, who is from Fort Defiance, Arizona. After Saad Kajanori will be speaking about the work she's doing for the Utah Navajo COVID relief funding, and hopefully from what she's sharing with you, you'll donate to the organization. Thereafter, I will go directly introducing our second poet, the remarkable Skeets from Fundraising, New Mexico. So before we start, I want to remind you all that we're doing a fundraising for the Utah Navajo COVID-19 relief program that my relative Diné, my Diné relative Saad is working with. She's been working endless hours fundraising and driving around the scorching hot Navajo reservation, delivering food and essentials to our Navajo elders and families who are not able to travel long distance. So before we start, I want to give Saad a few minutes to give a brief overview of what the Utah Navajo COVID-19 relief program has been doing for the Navajo families. Immediately after, I will introduce Rowie Shebala.
Yeah, Pamela. Okay. Muted. Yat a she Sahar Kajanori Inishia. Now Kajanan Slanto Persian by Shichin, Ani that Shichado Persian that Chanele. What's Adinez Sanenchlan? How good evening, everybody. My name is Sahar Kajanori. I'm coming to you live from Montezuma Creek, Utah. This is the headquarters of the Utah Navajo COVID Relief Program. And we have established this on the campus of the Utah Navajo Health System clinic. So Utah Navajo Health System has 4 clinics across Utah Navajo, and we are currently working every day to make sure that we have food packages going out to our elders, our 65 and over elders, those who are experiencing autoimmune compromised conditions, also families in need. And what has taken precedence is our COVID positive families and households. So each day we are organizing and preparing or actually carrying out a drive-through, a curbside pickup, where individuals can pick up their packages. As you see pictured here, this is the founder of this relief program, Mr. Pete Sands, a tall fellow in the striped mask. So he has created this program under UNHS, the Utah Navajo Health System, and on a daily basis, we find ourselves compelled to push ourselves just a little bit harder. We know that there are so many people relying on us to make sure that we are able to get food packages out. If they're COVID positive households, once they get a call with their test results, within 24 hours, we make sure that they have food and supplies to start quarantine. Within 7 days, we make sure we get a second package, and before their 14 day, we deliver the third package. So anything that we can do to make sure that we are finding ways to flatten the curve, that's our goal. So we were successful in launching our huge mass testing drives. And this brought out thousands of individuals from the Utah Navajo and from other areas within the Navajo Nation. We were kind of just chomping at the bit to make sure that we could test and identify areas that were positive and to resolve that as quickly and as best as we could. So I love this photo so much, this photo on the right. Our cute four-legged friend, her name is Evelyn, the little sheepy. This is one of the fabulous sights that we get to enjoy. We have elders who sometimes aren't able to leave their houses because they don't drive or they don't have transportation. And oftentimes individuals are on fixed incomes and they don't have family members that are able to take them to town, or it's a health concern. So we've been very proactive in making sure that these individuals weren't forgotten. And that tends to be the case here in this kind of remote corner. But we're doing our best to make sure that we are able to fulfill that and to make them our top priority. Pete is our founder. I coordinate, and Kayla is new to the team and she does our supplies. So the three of us, we are all from this community. We're all from Montezuma Creek or Aneth. We all went to Whitehorse High School. It's amazing how we find ourselves having lived off the res and then come back, and especially during a time where our community needs us. And this is definitely it's so wonderful to be home and to help in some capacity. So as upsetting as COVID has been, this has also been really a moment for me to cherish, because I see relatives that I haven't seen in ages. So thank you, Roberto. So I'm very, very, very thankful to have been here at this place at this time, and to be given the opportunity to do more than watch online, but for me to actually roll up my sleeves and sweat it out in the sun. And if you're ever in the area after COVID, give me a holler, because I'd love to show you how beautiful the landscape is here, and you really experience the hospitality. Whether or not we are a group of individuals that have we have so much love to offer, and the hospitality is always there. But the issue with COVID is it's a really isolating virus. And so a lot of times, a lot of individuals are finding themselves completely isolated and alone. So oftentimes these delivering packages is their time to at least say hello or wave to us through the window, or point, at the dog that's attacking a wheel or something of that sort. So a little res reference. Yeah, that's a little bit about Utah Navajo COVID.
Thank you, Sahar, for sharing the work that you're doing. I follow her on social media, and you can see updates that she's doing, visiting communities out there, and I'm very thankful that she's able to do that. So we're going to go into our first poet. I'm going to read her bio. Roanna Rowie Shebala is Diné and Zuni from Fort Defiance, Arizona. Her clans are the Cliff Dweller, born for start of the Red Streak clan. Her maternal grandparents are the Big Water clan, and her maternal grandparents are the Zuni Frog clan. Rowie received her BA in theater at Northern Arizona University and is currently working on her MFA in creative writing at the Institute of American Indian Arts, IAIA, in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Known as a spoken word artist, Rowie has been featured on 4 National Poetry Slam teams, a 5-time representative of the Woman of the World Poetry Slam, and a 2-time representative for the Individual World Poetry Slam. Representing the following cities: Phoenix, Sedona, Flagstaff, Arizona, and Albuquerque, New Mexico. Her work has been featured in Button Poetry, Indian Country Today, in various zines and magazines such as Anik Press, Red Ink, Wicked Banished Press, and Suspect Press. Rowie performs her spoken word poetry at the Lincoln Center for the Out of Doors project and continues to share her performance nationally. She credits her father for giving her the gift of storytelling. Her work combines cultural stories, poetry, and performance. Lastly, she is also a member of Saad, which is a Diné creative writing collective. Her book, which we will show, as you see here, can be purchased on Amazon.com. Welcome, Rowie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for having me here. I'm really excited. I just came over from another reading, and I was really happy that you guys were here to have me. And Sahara, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing for our people. It means so much to me, and I've tried to do what I can too, as well. And just thinking about the impact that COVID-19 had on our people, it's really frightening and scary. So I really appreciate the work that you and your family and community and the what you're doing for our people. So I really appreciate that. And also thank you to Pamela for having us here and wanting to bring this awareness of out to those who may not know what is happening back at home. So I have poems that I definitely want to share with you all. And just during this COVID, the quarantine, it's been a lot to take in, and trying to write about the subject matter, and especially when it hits so close to home, it's very hard, and it's very emotionally hard for me to try to write about this, especially when I have lost some relatives, and I've had some relatives who have become sick from this sickness. So it's I had written one poem, but then it's still very close to heart, to a point where it's I'll have to share it at another time, because it's still a little too. It's fresh. It's happening. It's still happening right now on what's going on. So, but I am wanting to spend and read some poems of home for you all. And I apologize. Roanna Shebala Union Sheh Sanjikin Nestle Tashit Nibashashin Twatsonesha Nast Ajeshanella, and I too wanted to greet you all with my formal greeting as a Diné, woman. So kind of giving those are wanting to learn more about it. Just recently, I had lost a relative to COVID, and it was I guess our cake lady. It's not something that, she was the one who made our cakes, and I my daughter's birthday was just a few days ago, and I was ordering a cake for her, and it was so hard because the person that I would usually order a cake from is no longer here. And the cakes that she used to actually make were so beautifully and intricate, and they were always round cakes. And she always would put some type of native rug design onto those cakes. And it was just the intricacy that she had on there. And then even just knowing her family and how her family and were related within our clan system and the community that she had, it was just so amazing. And it's a lot of things you would think about, just like a cake, a birthday cake. You don't really understand or even take into that type of that, I guess, we take for granted. of those little things that can happen, those little things that are within a birthday party or in a party or a celebration, such as a cake. And my late Che is grandpa, our maternal grandpa. So my late Che, he would always talk about a cake and how its significance, especially for Diné people, with kind of like with our some of our ceremonies that we use that cake in. So my family, we regard our cakes with a very high esteem, especially with those who make them in the way that she made them. So I just kind of want to like acknowledge her and the family that she has, and just like on how close to home that it hit us. We would have like have different type of birthday songs, or have people like describe the cake. And it's a high honor within my family when someone would say, can you please go and describe the cake and talk about the cake and the significance of that cake. So there's just something that I just kind of want to express and acknowledge that and tell you all of how COVID has hurt and come across my part of the community, and just some of my other relatives that I had lost from this disease. And it's scary. And it's even to a point where having that hug, like we like hugs. Everybody likes hugs. The handshake is essential, and we're very tight within our community. So it's just kind of hard seeing this. So seeing the work that our relatives are doing to help our elders, to help our people who are sick, and just trying to be there is very significant. And then even having people who are outside helping our community with helping with those funds and helping with the with what they can is very significant. So I appreciate every single one of you that are here, wanting to listen, wanting to know more, or even and just wanting to hear our words of poetry, and just hoping that it heals in some sense, and that we're doing that in sense. So before I start crying and getting more emotional, I will read poems with you all. And I might as well just get my hard emotional poems out there, and then kind of bring up uplifting from there with you all. So I am a spoken word artist, slam poet, and poet. That's kind of where I started off with my journey of poetry. And so I'll definitely be sharing some poems with you, my slam poems as well. But I wanted to talk about my Che and how he has been this really amazing man in my life, and up until his passing. But I was his favorite. So he and so I like sharing the poem about him, and then some other poems are referenced in here about that. He lived in Arizona all his life. He was lived on the Navajo Nation all his life, been all over the country. My grandma and my Che used to travel everywhere. My grandma used to make jewelry, and she would travel, and she would go to different museums and different like markets, and she would sell her jewelry. She made it as far up into Canada. She made it to Washington, D.C. They actually lobbied in Washington, D.C. For the Native American Freedom Religious Act. So my Che was part of that. They've gone and walked around all over New York City. They've been up towards like Montana. We have relatives. They made friends and relatives all over the country, like from Montana, Oklahoma, South Dakota. But they have never gone to the Grand Canyon. And it is like 2 hours away from where they live is the Grand Canyon. So my Che, his whole life has never been to the Grand Canyon. And he, so one day, woke up and I picked him up and I was like, Che, let's go. We're going to the Grand Canyon. And he was like, really? I'm like, yeah, we're going to go to the Grand Canyon. He was like, no, it's okay. I don't want to go. I don't want to go to the Grand Canyon. I'm like, come on, Che, let's go to the Grand Canyon. You've never been there your whole life. You've been to Disneyland, you worked at Disneyland, you've gone to all these places, but you've never been to the Grand Canyon. He's like, okay, let me get my hat. We always wore a cowboy hat. So we go to Flagstaff. We stop at this little restaurant, and he was a sweet tooth, so he loved eating pie a la mode. So we got some pie, and he enjoyed that. And he was just like looking around. He's like, so when are we going to go to this big ditch? That's what he called the Grand Canyon, because I heard it was a really big ditch. So I was like, okay, let's go. So we get back on the freeway, and we're heading towards Williams, Arizona, and we're about to take that right turn. And within that time, him and I were talking, and he was teaching me songs that he had learned, and just talking to me about San Francisco Peaks, which is regarded as one of our sacred mountains right up there. And so we're just having this conversation that only a Che and a granddaughter would have. We're driving, and there's a road that goes right next to the Grand Canyon, and you can see the cliffs happening right there. And there's cars behind me too. So he goes, stop. The Grand Canyon's like right there. Stop. I was like, I can't, Che, I can't. There's cars behind me, and it's a one lane. I can't. You have to wait. He's like, stop. I was like, I can't. We'll get there. So we go up, and I pulled him up into the visitor center, and he gets out, and he's 87 years old. And he just had knee surgery a few years. So his knees were that great. So he jumped out of the car, and he takes off from me, and he goes straight towards the edge. And I was like, wait, Che, running back. And then he's just like, grab my hat. So I had to go back, grab his hat. He always had to wear his cowboy hat. So I grabbed it, and he put it on. Then he went up to the edge of the visitor center, and he looked over, and he just looking at it, and he's like, wow, look at that. That's a really big ditch. And it's just his wonderment in his eyes and everything is just was the best thing in my whole life. Was just seeing that, just how he looked over. He looked like he was 6 years old all over again, just right there. And I was like, okay, Che, let me take pictures. Okay. So he was taking pictures and doing that. He's like, let's go over there now. And he just takes off, and he's trying to keep up with him. And then he's like, take my picture here. I was like, okay. So I took his picture. And he just looked around. Okay, I'm done. Let's go. And then we just walked, and he just took off and walked right back to the car, and we left. And that was his time at the Grand Canyon. So I've had so many different type of adventures that I had with my Che. So this poem I'm going to read, it's called "He Calls My Name." My Che, he had dementia, and that's ultimately kind of what took him from this world. So he it was my name that always came, so it was kind of hard for me too, but this is called "He Calls My Name." He held me above his head, showing me to the universe, praising me to the gods. I was going to be the one to watch him when he gets old. A lot of responsibility to give a newborn too. No one told me that playing my traditional attire, climbing up trees, ladders, rolling down hills in a barrel was blasphemy. I was just a girl who jumped 4 corners, jaywalked across with a skip, walked on the wild side of Old Red Lake Road, coming out with scraped knees, a dog bite, unraveled braids, leaving dust storms behind me with a bike and a cherry snow cone, and my skin a shade of brown like the earth after it rains. He called me a crazy Indian, just like him. 3. When your grandpa yells your name and tells you to grab the wheel of a 91 Dodge Ram, you grab the wheel, you turn it right, clockwise, always clockwise, heads jolted and our laughter echo across the valley of the wind. He taught me how to make my own roads, buckle up, shift gears and step on it. Don't be afraid to speed just a little. 4. He let me go He let go of the wheel from exhaustion, turning clockwise into a wash and into a trunk tree of an old willow. This, as his foot weighed down, always wanting to go forward, always go forward, but remember where you come from. My Che's words ripple through my timeline. 5, when becoming a woman, a couple of things to remember. Keep your shoes laced and tight. Find a nice tree to run around. Think positive as you run east. Think positive as you grind corn. Think positive as your elders yell at you and when you're playing baseball in your traditional clothes, and never forget your name. 6, you cannot call yourself a man until you go face to face with a tornado. Wrestle him up a bit. Watch it become calm and tamed into a light breeze. And you can't call yourself a storm until you hear the wind whistle your name. 7, I took him to see the Grand Canyon. He looked off the cliff and turned to me in amazement. Wow, that's a really big ditch. I took a picture of him at the Grand Canyon as proof. When the doctors say words like dementia, Alzheimer's, sundowners, you think this must be consequences from boxing, bull riding, hugging willow trees, and taming storms. His memories drift away into a light breeze. 8, this is not the last stanza. He remembers working at Disney World as an Indian rowing a canoe across the river. He laughs and says, Navajos don't row canoes. They had to teach me to be Indian. Stupid. He looks at my brothers and sisters, struggling to call them by name. Before embarrassment can cover his face, he looks at me, holds me close to him, and tears says, you will take care of me when I get old. And he calls my name. So that was my tape poem. So I'm going off of that poem and talking about the Grand Canyon. I have gone to the Grand Canyon 3 times in my life, and taking him was one of them. The first time I went was with my first boyfriend, and it turned out to be a very toxic relationship. It was his first time. Theme of this is each man in this poem, I took them to see the Grand Canyon for their first time. So I don't plan on going to the Grand Canyon anymore. So someone was teasing me about that earlier. But this is called, I've only been to the Grand Canyon 3 times in my life. 1, I went with a man who gripped my hand, brought me to the edge, leaned in, whispered, fall, threatening to let me go. The only echo I heard among the canyon walls was the strike of flint in my throat, and the first time I tasted ash. 2, I went with a man who loved me unconditionally. I brought him to the edge. He leaned in with his 87-year-old hands. Wow, that's a really big ditch. And the echo I heard among the cedar trees were his whispered prayers. The first time I felt purpose. 3, I went with a man who chose me every single day. He brought me to the edge. We leaned over and he said, this is us. The only echo I heard among the rock was our ceremony. The first time my tongue could speak his language in mine. So that was that poem. My Che comes in and out of my poems all the time, and he has very significant when it comes to the teachings that I have. So the Navajo Nation Fair is definitely something that every person should experience in their life. And unfortunately, because of COVID, our fair has been canceled this year, but it's a week-long fair. it is, I would say it's bigger than any state fair. It is bigger than Arizona State Fair, definitely bigger than New Mexico State Fair, and it's a week long. There's so many things that could that there is to do. There are pictures of our parade. It lasts for hours. You have to get a spot the night before. You have to camp out and find your, like, it's crazy. I took my boyfriend to his first Navajo Nation fair, and he's Zuni, so he's just like right next door to us, and he's never been to the Navajo Nation fair. And I had to wake him up at 5 o'clock in the morning. We had to get ready and leave at 5:30 just to get a really good spot. He wasn't having it, but I this is I guess the protocol or the routine for the Navajo Nation fair for my family anyway. And he was like, "Why do we have to go so early?" Then he finally understood why we had to be there so early. And it was like even before the sun was up. And the parade doesn't start until 10. So we're there like 4.5 hours prior to the event. So it is definitely, if you guys are ever in around the time, it's the first week in September. So this is Asta Yaja goes to the Navajo Nation parade. Asta Yaja in our language, Diné, Asta Yaja means little lady, and that's what my Che used to call me when I was small. Asta Yaja is up before the sun. Her Che calls her a good Indian as he sips his coffee black with 2 sugars. The east horizon showing on the white line of sun. Her moccasins dangle over the lawn chairs while her blue velveteen dress draped over the lawn chairs, keeping her legs warm. Her hair at shoulder length with jagged bangs. She had cut her hair with unsupervised scissors the night before, wanting to look her best for the fair. Her brother was also missing clumps of hair. She thought he looked handsome. Trucks and cars line up on both sides of the road in Window Rock, Arizona. Grandmas and Che's are wearing their best turquoise, local politicians on horseback tossing 3 pieces of candy, res kids fighting over Tootsie Rolls, Asta Yaja's Che waving at royalty, "Aho, good job, Yat, hello." The parade is coming to an end. All children start to run and hide. The Apache crown dancers are coming. Asta Yaja counting her candy, throwing peppermints at her brother and sisters. She doesn't hear the bells, but she feels the breath behind her ear. An Apache crown dancer grabs her hand and she screams, cries, apologizes to her siblings. He let her go. Asta Yaja's mom says to her, "I told you if you weren't going to be good, they'd take you." Asta Yaja is on her best behavior for the rest of the parade. So, for those who do not know, I know this is a very very cultural, I guess you can say cultural piece within the community of the Navajo Nation. Our neighboring tribe, the White Mountain Apaches, they have their crown dancers, and it was said that if you're a naughty kid, they will discipline you and take you. So you always have to be on your best behavior. I found out that was true. So that was me. I was when that happened. So whenever they would hear them coming, my mom and dad would tell me the Apache crown dancers are coming. So it's something definitely that you would have to see and experience. So I would invite you to the Navajo Nation Parade to see that. So I know I have a few minutes left, and I want to read 3 more pieces. Yes. 3 more pieces, and those would be more of like my slam pieces that I haven't performed these in a minute. So I'm excited to perform them for you all. And they're still relevant today, I would think, us as Indigenous people and things that we experience, our history. A lot of our history isn't taught or even acknowledged. So, yeah, I'll definitely do 3 pieces for you today. One of the things that I hope that you all know or have heard of is MMIW, Murdered Missing Indigenous Women. And that is a lot of our women throughout the country, through Indigenous people, have gone missing. And a lot of times there are no follow-up, or there's no searching, or the cases are never closed. So it's we try to make awareness of that. And then even just like talking about the representation of Indigenous people, of how the representation of Pocahontas and how she is essentially our most famous murdered missing Indigenous woman. And it's crazy because if you were to look at the Disney version, the depiction of her as a full-grown woman when she was really 10, 11 years old, and like on how she was like taken, and it was still, we just kind of think about that, and even just using her name as a racial slur is very insulting. So just to reiterate that, please don't call people Pocahontas or women Pocahontas in any type of context. So here we go, MMIW. When the president called Elizabeth Warren Pocahontas, he thought he was being clever and funny, only to confirm the idolization of a child being turned into a fetish. In 2017, nearly 10,000 Indigenous women were reported missing. Her real name was Matawoka. Parading for flowers between 2 streams, she resembled her mother, so she took on her name. Pocahontas dies at 21. Taken by English captors, ask yourself if your favorite princess were alive today, would she be hashtagging Me Too? Taking her name back for all Indigenous women screaming, I survived. In 1995, she becomes a Disney princess. She becomes a Halloween costume. Her 10-year-old body becomes full-figured, a Barbie doll collectible. It's the year that John Smith's story becomes a musical starring a rape victim. It's the year that I learned I had to know all the colors of the wind. It was the year that I learned that saving white men always makes you the hero. 1617, our daughter dies in England. Renamed Rebecca, a good Christian name for a good Indian. How else would she have been accepted if she wasn't whitewashed? Language lost, new name, new clothes, new her. Would we have put out an Amber Alert? Posted pictures of her assailant, described the ship in details, filed her name along with the others. We are still searching for her homes, wanting to bring her home. When you call Native women Pocahontas, your breath reeks of a missing persons report. When you call us Pocahontas, it says little girls tickle your fancy. Murdered missing Indigenous woman is no recent epidemic, and you wonder why we are so quick to go to battle, because history has never been kind to our women. So that was that poem. I might have gone over my 20 minutes. I don't know if you want me to do my last 2 poems, or if you want me to stop.
You can go into your 2 poems.
Okay. Alrighty. Last two poems. And alrighty. So where are you at? That's another poem. Love You Some Indians. It is becoming irrelevant soon, I hope, but here we go. Everyone in Cleveland loves the Indians. Everybody loves them some Indians. Love you some Indians. Be the Indian, not the cowboy. Throw on your war bonnet. Tell me it's fashion. Tell me how imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Go to your local truck stop. Buy some dream catchers made from China. Hang them on the rear view mirrors of your Jeep Grand Cherokees, your Pontiacs, your Winnebagos. And as you drive down I-40, your vehicles will catch the dreams, roadkill by manifest destiny. All the while, your radio chimes, this land is your land, this land is my land. Love you some Indians. Honor them by making them mascots. Turn them into cartoon characters. Costume yourselves in crimson paint. Use the blood off a red skin smeared all over, cover every inch. Add big black eyes, a big smile, and white teeth. And don't forget the fake feathers. Cover your skin. Cover your skin. Ooh, I'm sorry. Cover your skin. Don't forget the fake feathers. Add big black eyes, big smile, and white teeth. Hide like you are ashamed of pigment, like it separates you from the norm. Tan that hide, work beneath suns, make it so scarlet it becomes purple and the shade. Add feathers, add bows and arrows. You are Indian, now dance. The stadium is your bonfire. You are Indian. Practice your tomahawk chop. You are Indian. Cheer for the braves that have a higher enlisting rate in our armed forces. Cheer for the Kansas City Chiefs as they make their way for the halftime spectacular. Welcome the Seminoles. As a ghost of Osceola haunts the Enfield, Washington Redskins, don't change your name. Instead, hashtag Redskins Pride. Make social media our battleground. We all know that Indians don't have Twitter accounts. We still use smoke signals. Applaud the Cleveland Indians, Chiefs, Wahoos, bright white chompers as it casts you a reflection on how to love you some Indians. Go paint the town. Double coat over history, whitewash the red bricks of the reservation. Let's have Indian days in our school. Use November to teach our student the turkey dance with colored construction headdresses and teepees. Now go home. Wash off the paint. Go back to your thinking that you honored your team. Go back to thinking that you honored the Indian. We are only costumes. Go back to thinking that you'll only find us in Disney and Western films. Go back to thinking that we only exist in history books. Go back to thinking that all of this was just fun and games. Now shake my hand. Ignore how your fingers lasso around our wrists, tying us to our ancestors, yet we still survive. Now telling us how knowing me is your privilege and how you loved you, an Indian. That was in 2017, so I'm really excited about the change, the name, which is definitely very, very necessary. So, and that needs to happen. All right, and this is my last poem. Thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate all of the work and all of the effort. So thank you so much again for having me here. This is my Origins Over Coffee. I remember my mother telling me, if you drink coffee when you're young, you'll always be short. 5'3", and my coffee is strong this morning. As I sit here and sip all of its bitter taste, I seem to have grown to enjoy. When I was a kid, my dad let me sample his coffee, the strong stuff, straight out of a saucer filled with boiling water and coffee grinds, 2 spoonfuls of sugar and no cream. It was bitter. I learned to take life with the minimum amount of sweet. That was a moment I stopped growing, as the children around me continued to sprout into skyscrapers placed in the middle of the reservation, and I remained a hogan, our traditional home. Single story, 1 room with 2 windows on the north and south ends of this home, and round. Soft dirt floors that kept the imprints on my feet vivid. A fire placed in the center. The smell of burning oak, cedar, and pine trees never seemed to leave my hair, or the songs that have been sung throughout the night bounce off the walls of this home, only to be repeated over and over. It has become more poetry than song. This is my body. This is my body. I'm sorry. I know the origins of my blood. It's the first thing my parents taught me. I can date it back to the beginning of time where my gift of storytelling came from. My body is ancient. Let me tell you the first time that I ran east, how my twin sons visited their father, the sun, how I used the mud off of my skin to create the people of this world. Let me explain to you how the cracks of my feet and the broken nails fell as I climbed the cliffs of Canyon de Chelly, hiding from the cavalry, how cold that winter was when we were told to take that long walk, and the electricity in the air when they said we can return home. Let me tell you how the missionaries beat me with leather each time that I spoke my name in my mother tongue, how the night sky looked each time that I ran from their schools. Let me explain to you how I raised how I raise my fist in the air with the emblem on my shoulder with AIM as I watch the government take Leonard Peltier as if keeping him behind bars is the only way to save that man and to kill his Indian. Let me tell you how I wept as my sister from the Hopi died for this country in former lands in a uniform. Let me explain to you how my body trembled seeing the 7th generation being surrounded by attack dogs, men in uniform with a preferred taste of oil than clean water, praying they don't pull that trigger. You see, we learn to take life with the minimum amount of sweet, like our mother's songs. Our father's protection. Our elders' stories. And how our children is holding on to our culture for dear life. You see, I'm standing here, whispering a prayer as I tell you my origins over a sip of coffee with 2 spoonfuls of sugar and no cream. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it, and I hope you guys are all blessed, and thank you for your support for our people. Yeah.
Wow, Rowie, thank you so much. You just are phenomenal. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure everyone is just blown away by the words that you're able to share. So thank you again. I'm going to go in directly into our next reader, who is equally phenomenal. His name is Jake, and Jake Skeets is from the Black Streak Wood Born for the Water's Edge clan. His maternal grandparents are the Red Running into the Water People clan, and his paternal grandparents are from the Saltwater People clan. He is Diné from Vanderwagen, New Mexico. Jake is a winner of the 2018 Discovery Boston Review Poetry Contest and has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. His book, Eyes Bottle Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers, is a National Poetry Series winning collection of poems. Jake is the editor for an online publication called Cloud Throat, an organization of poetry salons and reading series called Pollen Tongue, based in the Southwest region. Jake received his MFA in poetry from the Institute of American Indian Arts and from IAIA. He is also a member of Saad Behajon, a Diné Writers Collective, and currently teaches at Diné College in Saline, Arizona. His current book can be purchased at milkweek.org, brightsidebookshop.com, or palabrasbookstore.com. Thank you and welcome, Jake.
Yeah, thank you, Pamela. And thank you to Brittany, and thank you to the Autry for having me tonight. And thank you all to the audience for sharing your evening with us here to both, hear about the type of relief efforts that are going on for the Navajo Nation, and also listening to Rowie and I. And of course, thank you to Rowie. It's an honor to share this space with Rowie. We have been sort of reading together and sort of sharing words together for several years now. So it's always really exciting to share a space with Rowie. And finally, I would definitely like to echo thank you to Sahar and the work of the Utah Navajo COVID relief efforts. And I'm always very amazed and just in awe about the community's response to the COVID relief here on the Navajo Nation. I'm coming to you from Saline, Arizona, which is about an hour north of the capital, Window Rock, Arizona, of the Navajo Nation. So I teach here at Diné College, which is our tribe's tribal college. And it's when the quarantine first hit, I was just about to go to AWP when it sort of began getting real. And I remember telling my students, because it was right before spring break, and I was leaving class, and I was telling them, wash your hands. When we come back from spring break, you probably won't see me because I had all these book tour events throughout the month of March, including AWP, and then right after. So I was like, I'm not going to see you for a while. Just make sure to wash your hands, take care of your families, and then of course the pandemic got very real. Diné College extended the spring break like most colleges, and then ultimately decided to go online. And just that transition from in-person to online was definitely difficult because of the type of infrastructure here on the reservation, right? Just access to basic things like electricity or water, and those things are definitely very limited here. So I had students emailing me about the assignments, but also saying, hey, my auntie or my grandma was just tested positive, or I had to move back to these deep towns, these deep places, and sort of deeper parts of the reservation where there is no access to electricity or running water. And they're like, I'm not going to be able to finish the class. How can you help? So it was definitely a very big transition for me. So it's going on right now. It's kind of just been a learning process because we've been having curfews and lockdowns. In a few minutes, actually, our curfew is going to hit. And here at Diné College, they're pretty practical about our lockdowns. They physically close the border, the entrance and exits to our college, so no one can go in or out. And then, of course, to do that during the entire weekend. So I've been kind of just holed up in my house, trying to pass the time, trying to sort of understand how am I going to teach classes this fall online with this pandemic. So it's kind of very interesting circumstance to be in. So again, also just to traditionally introduce myself to Diné relatives who may be in the audience. Thank you. I'll start with some new work. This is a poem I wrote in celebration of Lucille Clifton. The 92Y Poetry Center in New York asked a bunch of poets to write poems in response or in celebration of Lucille Clifton. And this one I wrote because Clifton has a poem called Sonoran Desert Poem that Clifton wrote after visiting Arizona, visiting the University of Arizona Poetry Center. And the result was a poem called Sonoran Desert Poem. And that was the poem that sort of spoke to me because I'm from here. I'm sort of situated and centered around the Southwest. I don't think I've ventured far off. I went to UNM for undergrad. I went to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe for graduate program. So kind of just staying here. So this poem is called Sonoran Desert Poem. And it starts with a little quote from Clifton. The ones who live in the desert, if you knew them, you would understand everything. Lucille Clifton. 1. Coming to the desert for the first time, and the night turns over a millennia before you. Just say the name mountain. Of mountains, make more. Out of bird formations or drainage pipes, deserts build water, so drink the lightning. 2. So you have been here for some time. Velvet ants and paper wasps testify sandstone bones are left long under sage. Bones sculpted by sand. Sand that collects its legs in the atmospheric heat to storm and swallow an entire city. A city that too builds its water from fly ash. Drink from that now. The cactus wren finished the lightning. 3. There are those who come to the desert for the first time. I'll start over. 3. There are those who come to the desert because they have always been here. Wind coyotes grow thorns in the inches of light sunsets have. of mountains, do not make a mountain. Reach for one and let it turn away from you. This next poem mentions a couple places. So the first one is Window Rock, Arizona, which again is the capital of the Navajo Nation. And it's also a place where I grew up a little bit. My family, my mom switched jobs when I was in high school, so we switched, and I was able to go to an on-reservation high school, which is Window Rock High School. Before that, I had gone to public school off the reservation. But I was only in Window Rock High School for about a year before I decided to transfer back to the public school off-res. Because when I was there, I was relearning things I had already learned, and it was a weird sort of situation to be in, because at that particular high school on the reservation, they were asking me questions like, okay, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to go into refrigeration? Do you want to be an electrician? Are you going to become an iron worker? And they had sort of pathways set for those. I didn't want to do any of those things. I wanted to, just finish high school and maybe go on to college, but that wasn't something that they were presenting. So it's a weird situation there. So it mentions that place, Window Rock. And then it also mentions Gallup, New Mexico. Gallup, New Mexico is where I consider a second hometown, because again, I was bused into public school off-res. And Gallup, New Mexico is a border town. If any of you are aware, it sits on the historic Route 66. The railroad went through there as well. And during this pandemic, it's become a central hub for a lot of families, because again, we have very limited on resources, very limited on grocery stores and things like that. So often Navajo families have to travel from the reservation into border towns like Gallup, New Mexico, and that's where they get their supplies. And for a while, it was kind of interesting to see that dynamic. And then all of a sudden, the New Mexico side began having a bit more strict curfews with the pandemic and everything like that. And then there was a time, I believe like a week and a half, where Gallup completely went on lockdown. They weren't letting people in or out. They had National Guards at all the entrances, and they were turning away these Navajo families that were trying to get into Gallup for supplies. Keep in mind that Gallup, the Navajo Nation, also has a weekend curfew. So these families were left without places to go. They couldn't travel to Gallup. They couldn't travel within the reservation. They were literally stuck in their homes. So it's this weird sort of situation that sort of arose, and it's really showing gaps in the types of infrastructure we have here on the reservation, but also the types of violences and aggressions that local governments, city, state, and federal governments are doing to Native people. So it's a weird thing to think about. But this poem is called Let There Be Coal. Let there be coal. 1, a father hands a sledgehammer to 2 boys outside Window Rock. The older goes first, rams a rail spike into the core. It sparks. No light comes, just dust cloud, glitter black. The boys load the coal. Inside them, a generator station opens its eye. A father sips coal slurry from a styrofoam cup, careful not to burn. 2, train tracks and mines split Gallup in 2. Men spit coal, tracks rise like a spine when Drunktown kneels to the east. 3, Spider Woman cries her stories coiled in warp and wool, the rug now hung in a San Francisco or Swedish hotel. We bring in the coal that dyes our hands black, not like ash, but like the thing that makes a black sheep black. 4, this is a retelling of the creation story, where Navajo people journeyed 4 worlds and God declared, let there be coal. Some Navajo people say there are actually 5 worlds. Some say 6. A boy busting up coal in Window Rock asks his dad, "When do we leave for the next one?" His dad sits his coffee down to hit the boy. Coal doesn't bust itself. So like I mentioned, Gallup is sort of the central setting for my first book, Eyes Bottled Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers. And it goes by 2 nicknames. One of the nicknames that it was given was a place called Drunktown, USA, that was given to it. I'm not sure exactly where. I tried to find exactly the origin of Drunktown USA. I think it was like a 2020 special that they did on Gallup New Mexico, and that's where Drunktown USA came from, but don't quote me on that. I'm not exactly sure. So this poem is called Drunktown. Indian, Eden, open, tooth, bone, bruise, this town split in 2. Clocks ring out as train horns. Each hour hand drags into a screech. Iron, steel, iron. The minute hand runs its fingers through the outcrops. Drunktown. Drunk is the punch. Town, a gasp. In between the letters are boots crushing tumbleweeds. A tractor tire backing over a man's skull. Men around here only touch when they fuck in a back seat. Go for the foul with 30 seconds left. Hug their sons after high school graduation. Open a keg. Stab my uncle 47 times behind a liquor store. A bar called Eddie's sit at the end of the world. By the tracks, drunk men get some sleep. My father's uncle tries to get some under a long bed truck. The truck backs up to go home. I arrange my father's boarding school soap bones on white space and call it a poem. Like my father, I've come upon death, staggering into the house with beer on the breath. Mule deer splintered in barbed tendon, gray highway veins narrow, push, pull under teal and red hills. A man is drunk staggering into northbound lanes, dollar bills for his index and ring fingers, sands glitter with broken bottles, greens, deep blues, clears, and golds. This place is white cone, greasewood, Sanders, Whitewater, Bread Springs, Crystal, Chenli, Nazlini, Indian Wells, and all muddy roads lead from Gallup. The sky places an arm on the near hills, on the shoulder, dark gray, almost blue, bleeds into greens, blue-green, turquoise into hazy blue, pure blue, no gray or gold, or oil black seeped through. If I stare long enough, I see my uncle in a mirror, the bottle caps we use for eyes. An owl has a skeleton of 3 letters. O twists into L. The burrowing owl burrows under dead cactus. Feathers fall on horseweed and skull bone blown open. So, like I said, my first book, Eyes Bottled Dark. On the cover of the collection is a portrait, an Avedon portrait, the person in the photo is actually my uncle. Richard Avedon took a photograph of him for his book In the American West in 1979. And then a year later, in 1980, Benson was actually killed in Gallup. So the figure of Uncle takes a huge sort of space inside the collection, both this particular portrait, this particular person, but also just the figure of an uncle. Because when I was growing up, generally it's your uncles who are the ones that give you life advice, right? What does it mean to sort of live through the world? So this poem is the only poem that addresses this portrait directly, and it's called Drifter. After Benson James Drifter, Route 66, Gallup, New Mexico, June 30th, 1979, by Richard Avedon. Drift. To drift is to be carried by a current of air or water. But men are not the teeth of their verbs. They pry nouns open with a belt buckle to take a sip. Drifter. A drifter carried by a current of air or water makes his way from one place to another. Sea vagabond, sea transient, sea drunk. See a man with shoulder-length hair, dollar bills fisted, standing before a white screen. See his lips, how still, how horizon, how sunset. A train passing through. I tried to hug him through the spine. Left on the white space, his face becomes a mirror if I stare long enough. My face, charcoaled, purse, squinting at the camera. Train horn, punch shatters the mirror. Frees him from the page. My uncle leaps from the So this next poem is actually new work. I thought I'd go ahead and read some new work as well. This poem was published in the Rumpus just this year. It's one of the poems that came out of quarantine or early days of the pandemic. And it originally started out as an essay, because for me, writing poetry now seems kind of hard, but essays seem to be a bit easier. Which is a weird sort of situation. I've been saying that a lot, but it is so strange, uncertain atmosphere that we're in. But I think it's one that's really illuminating. So this one is called, it started out as an essay, and then it ended up being a 8-line poem. So this poem is called Eating Wild Carrots with My Brothers on the Mesa. Cicada wane. Water and sun race every infinite evening. Fall exists for the dock root to oscillate, each roof of every mouth, each winter with its obsessed wind, each spring that sees storm after storm, each wild that wilds, pasque flowers, opening palms to straight rain. All right, and the last poem that I'm going to read to you all. Again, thank you so much for sharing this evening with me. Thank you all to the organizers, and please give what you can to some of the very vulnerable families here on the reservation. Just this week is the Emerging Diné Writers Institute, which is a week-long writing camp that Navajo Technical University, my good friend Benny Lowey, hosts every year. And this year it's virtual. And every week these emerging Diné writers come together to talk about writing and poetry. And they've been sort of this entire week talking. And that's where me and Rowie were just earlier today, we're sort of giving presentations and reading for them. And the sort of constant theme that I've been hearing this week has been balance. The idea of beauty and ugliness, and what does it mean when you're acknowledging both in the world. And I think that's a apt sort of theme, because I feel like that's what we're doing now, is we're learning how to balance both what we have and also where we fall short or where we fall empty. So this poem is called In the Fields, and I borrow some lines from D.A. Powell, and I'm pretty sure you'll know which lines I'm referencing, because they deal with beauty and the idea of beauty. In the Fields, with lines from D.A. Powell. We unyoke owl pellets from marrow in desert meadow. His mouth a pigeon eye, a torch, a womb-turned flower. He, still a boy, dug from cactus skull, undresses into bark beetles. He unlearns how to hold a fist with my hand, bursts into dandelion seeds. We all are beautiful at least once. Mud water puddles along enamel. Eye teeth blossom into osprey. Our bones dampen like snow melt under squirrel grass. We could be boys together finally as milkvetch, tumbleweed, and sticker bush. We can be beautiful again beneath the sumac, yarrow, and bitter water. Yeah, thank you so much.
Wow, thank you so much, Jake. Your poetry is just amazing. Both of you, honestly, have like transferred me home for the evening. It's been a while since I've been back to the reservation. It's hard for me because my entire family, my relatives, nieces and nephews, aunts, uncles, everybody lives back on the reservation, and I'm the wild one that, you know, came out to the urban community of Los Angeles. So hearing your words really has like made me go back home. So thank you so much. I just want to remind you all that we are doing a donation fundraising and hope to get some donations tonight to help our nation. And also, I do this because I want people to understand that we have a lot of, we are natural storytellers, and there's a lot of Navajo writers out there, and I really want people to hear us and see us as opposed to just reading about us. I will pitch once again, you know, their books are all available online. Rowie's book, Chasing Sunshine from the Reservation, that can be purchased on Amazon.com. I got my copy yesterday, thank you. And then Jake's book, which I haven't gotten, I was hoping to get it today. Eyes Bottle Dark with a Mouthful of Flowers can be purchased at milkweed.org or brightsidebookstores.com. And from last week, Sherwin Bitsu's book, Dissolve, which I have a copy of, can be purchased at coppercanyonpress.org. And then Tacey M. at City's book, Rain Scowls, can be purchased at unmpress.com. And I haven't gotten her book, so I'm waiting for those two books, and I was hoping I could get them today. But I really hope, you know, you as viewers will consider purchasing work from Native artists. I hope that you will consider helping our nation, our Navajo nation, with the efforts that my relative Sahar is doing. If you could, Sahar, can you also just share a little more of what you're doing with the organization with Utah Navajo COVID relief?
I will keep it short, but as we are we're in the middle of this huge hot heat as it's midsummer, and you can imagine what it looks like tumbleweeds and dry. And so that also means we need water. As sometimes people, a lot of times, 30% of Navajo Nation doesn't have running water. We are clever and we find ways to adapt. We purchase bottles of water at the gas station before we go home, and we are conservative. But you can conserve so much, and sometimes you need to refill. And essentially, that's why we are fundraising. So things like non-perishable food items and cleaning supplies and PPE. Our clinic, especially as we tackle harder cases where we're meeting COVID positive families. If anybody's medical supply, oh my gosh, I keep reading the name, those white silver suits or the plastic things that the nurses and the doctors wear when they meet COVID patients. And if
Scrubs?
no, not the scrubs. They always remind me like an astronaut suit, kind of. Oh gosh, I'm so embarrassed that I'm totally not grabbing the name for this. They aren't the disposable cloth ones, but they kind of like gowns. They are part of the PPE. Well, now that I'm like the pressure's on, I'm losing it. But so if we don't have medical supply friends out there, we could also purchase them. So that's essentially why I left I think hazmat suits. Clever. Yes, thank you, Hannah. UtahNavajoRelief.com, and that will take you to the Utah Navajo Health System donation page. And right now, during COVID, that's where all the funds are going, is to the relief program, so we can grab more food and cleaning supplies and make sure that we're getting supplies out to our seniors and making sure that we are well stocked and ready for upcoming months, as we're not seeing a huge decline, especially when our border towns are kind of like, we're seeing an increase in numbers, especially here in Utah Navajo. So thank you so much, Autry and Pamela, for organizing, and Roanna and Jake. And I was listening to your clans and I thought, are we related? But I didn't have any matching clans, but it doesn't matter. We're all related in kinship. So yeah.
And I just wanted to jump in. Pamela put it in the chat, but we do have about 7 minutes. We're scheduled till 7:30 Pacific Standard Time. If you are coming from Navajo Nation, I think it's Mountain Time.
Yep.
So I think y'all are an hour before me.
Yes.
Okay, yes, you are I am in the future. Not that it matters. But if anyone had a question for either Jake or Rowie or Pamela or Sahar, I don't consider myself as much of a wealth of knowledge of any of them. But if anyone had a question institutionally, it's 8. It's later. Thank you.
Yes.
So I thought it was an hour earlier. Okay, well, my meetings for the tech checks probably didn't make sense all week. Thanks everyone for rolling with it. Okay, for Jake and Rowie, or really everyone, who are you reading right now? I love that question. I'm not going to answer, but I love that question.
I can start. This is what I'm reading right now. And soon to be reading both Jake and Tacey's poetry book once I get them. Hopefully I'll get them tomorrow. Most likely I'll get them tomorrow. I ordered them last week, but yeah, Rowie, your book is amazing. You had me in tears. I was reading the first one and I just started crying, as I said, because both of your work, Jake and Rowie, you're really making me miss home. The Hojon, I just loved. See, I'm already getting a little emotional, but it's just beautiful. And Jake, I can't wait to read your stuff. I've been plugging, both of your work in the chat. If people are interested in purchasing their work, please consider. So now you guys can share what you guys are reading.
So as part of the my last year in IIA, this is like writing my thesis, and that's kind of starting to get fun and scary at the same time. So I'm trying to think of initially how I got into IAIA is my letter, I guess my statement essay was talking about how poetry is a form of ceremony. And my dad, and there's a story behind that whole perspective of how poetry is my own ceremony. So as of right now, I'm reading Joy Harjo's An American Sunrise, and then simultaneously, my uncle, who is works with psychology, reading Healing Ceremonies, to see the correlation of both mental health and with poetry on how they can both kind of intercross and work together. So that's where I'm kind of going with my thesis. So I'm reading Indigenous psychology books and poetry. So I'm undertaking something crazy and probably overwhelming at the moment, but that's where I'm at.
So Rowie, someone had just asked a question about your book. Is there any other options besides Amazon where they can purchase your book?
I have copies with me currently. So if you want to purchase through me, you are able to do that.
Your website?
Email me. My website would probably I think it takes you straight to Amazon, but you can definitely email me and I can get you a signed copy. From that, I think I have 30 copies left at the moment.
Well, that's perfect because there's 35 people still in chat. Everyone should order a copy, and it's signed by Rowie.
And she provided her email in the chat.
Yeah, so if you guys want a copy, definitely email it to me, and then I can direct you to my Venmo or my PayPal, where you can definitely purchase from there.
Okay. Now, Jake.
Jake, just to end, it's either, we have two questions now. So who are you reading, or which poet first inspired you to start writing poetry? So you can kind of choose your own adventure, which you feel like answering.
I think I could probably quickly answer both. Right now I'm rereading Rising by Elizabeth Rush. It's a collection of essays about climate change, specifically on the East Coast. It's a really great book. I just finished my A History of My Brief Body by Billy Ray Belcourt, which I definitely would recommend. It's out recently by $2 Press, I think. Billy Ray Belcourt. It's a poet, writer from First Nations and in Canada. So definitely get that essay collection. In terms of the first poet that inspired me, I think it was probably Emily Dickinson. I won, which is probably cliche to say, but me, again, Window Rock High School, reservation kid, I entered one of my poems into a contest and I actually won. And they sent me the collection of Emily Dickinson, which is like this thick book. It's somewhere around here. Oh, it's right here. This thick book of collected Emily Dickinson. And then I just began mirroring how she wrote poems, and it was able to just come about that way.
That's bananas, because maybe I write because of Emily Dickinson, and I would have had no idea that was where this conversation was headed, which is amazing and brilliant all at the same time. It is 7:30. I'm going to put in the chat right now the link to the events page that's at the Autry. It has the bios for every person in the series. It has links to purchase books from everyone in the series. It has links to donate for the information that Sahar presented. Pamela, do we have anything else to say, or anyone else that was involved more on the creative side?
No, I just really want to thank you, Brittany, and the Autry for making this happen. I like that people are getting very excited to hear new voices, especially Native American voices. And I did this purposely just because, Saad Nizhóní our beautiful words. We do have beautiful words. And these poets that we have, I mean, with the Saad, the organization, the writing collective that with all these Navajo artists, I think it's phenomenal. I love the fact that all these creative people can come together, and I just want to, in some way, help Mike in some way. So thank you for providing this platform and giving us a larger platform for us to share our voices. So thank you. I think that pretty much concludes our evening. So thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoy this. As we said, we recorded this, so this should be available online in about a couple weeks. So thank you very much and have a good evening. Bye-bye. Hagone, Shike.